Welcome into another episode of Discard for Magic. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron.
And I'm the other host, James or Jexic, and today we're really excited to have on the Beast-Slumbers to talk about the much maligned Shimmersea Fae.
Much maligned. That's a great intro.
But actually, everybody loves them. They just wish they were stronger. And he's here today to tell us how to do that.
Yeah, right off the bat, just what's your buff for the Shimmersea Fae Beast? That's the entire podcast.
Don't even start, guys. Don't even start. Buff everything.
We'll leave it for the end.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Beast, why don't you start off by just giving us a little bit of introduction, how you found Summoner Wars, and we'll go from there.
How I found Summoner Wars. It starts a very long time ago. It was one of the first few board games that ever got to me in my life. All the way back in high school, my brother brought some board games back from one of his trips to the US, back to my home country in the Philippines. I just loved it. Basically, I'm a player of the typical games in that generation, so Magic the Gathering, whatnot. And so I'm pretty fascinated by, multiple factions, unique powers type of thing. So it was only a matter of time, really, that Summoner Wars got to me. Back then, it was first edition. I didn't get a chance to play that much, and I only really joined come second edition around Crimson Order, Mountain Vargath.
Got in on a good release. I like that release.
Yeah.
Which of those two factions do you like better, do you think?
I think what really drew me in was Crimson Order because when I was looking at the faction designs, I don't think they ever really had something like Daymar. I guess Mad Syrian back in first edition, but I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I never thought Summoner Wars could do that. And then I realized, oh no, this is second edition. They've got all the cool things now. So I thought, might as well hop into the pool while it's still pretty shallow enough that I could join in. So I did.
Awesome. Picking Crimson Order over the beloved Mountain Vargath. Wow.
I don't know. Mountain Vargath is pretty dry. They're all right. They're good.
Sounds like something Aaron would do. Pick Crimson.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Hey, I like them both. But yeah, I'd pick Crimson Order too. Anyway, why don't we hop into Shimmersea Fae? Why don't you just start out and give a couple of tips for people who are just starting out playing Shimmersea Fae?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So you guys actually picked a really good guest and a really bad guest to speak for the Shimmersea Fae. I don't play them like the conventional players do. Typically, people play the Shimmersea Fae as a very rush down, very opportunistic faction. If your opponent lets you, you can really gain a lot of ground with rush and attack phase summoning. High Tide lets you get up in your opponent's face very quick. But on the other side of that coin, you can burn out really quick because you draw a lot, you have to discard magic a lot, and you hope that you trade well with what you summon. Hope you get your dice. I play them a little bit more economically. Let's table that for another time. I would say if you're a new player coming into Shimmersea Fae, keep your scouts relatively safe. They're very important to the game plan of the Shimmersea Fae. A lot of their tricks revolve around their gates and scouts in general. And what you want to do is find clever spots where you could come up to your opponent and hit them hard with your swarm, your tidebreakers as well. Basically, a lot of the things that you want to do, you do it better with your scouts. So I think that's my off-the-cuff tip for new players.
Yeah, scouts are super important to Shimmersea Fae. A lot of fun, too. That attack phase summoning is it's such a fun concept, and scouts really take advantage of it.
I think a lot of the other factions are verging on that identity of Shimmersea Fae. One of the things that you guys are going to notice, like even Spectral Conclave can summon during the attack phase. That's a little bit of a shame. Would have been nice if Shimmersea Fae kept that to themselves, but we just can't help it, man.
Once the concept's out, it's going to work its way into other factions.
Yeah.
The next question along our list is, are there any must-play units or units you always play?
So I guess this is a part where we dive a little bit deeper. I try to play all my scouts and all my swarms. Again, they're key units to the faction. A lot of Shimmersea Fae's plays revolve around scouts. To reiterate, in that line of thinking, whenever I play swarms, I try to play swarms on my scouts as well, especially if I'm trying to get back the champions multiple times. We'll talk about that later. I think 3 of the 4 commons of the Shimmersea Fae are must play. Tidebreakers are decent in general. They have rush, 3 HP, 2 melee, 3 if you have a champ. So that's one of the things you guys hear about the Shimmersea Fae, is that they're very draw dependent. If you get your champs, their stuff is amazing. If you don't, you can kind of fall flat. The way I play them, there's ways to mitigate your draw order, but in general, I think their units are all pretty good except the last one. And this last one is going to be, I think, the hottest take of all time. I don't think I've heard a hot take from the other guests yet in this podcast. This is understated. I actually think that oracles are better than people think for a few reasons. One, I play the Shimmersea Fae a bit more conservatively. I tend to not rush in. I move forward with Nymira, but typically I try to stay around row 3, row 4, so around the midfield, but not too far past that unless I have a good offensive. And so, given that I don't really rush in, I don't really push the offensive with them, I value oracles and scouts, their 2 range commons, very, very much. I like to do this thing. If my opponent has no targets in the middle of the board, they have to come to me when all I do is poke with an oracle. And then from there, I have more reach. Because they approach me, then I can punish them by moving forward. I don't need a gate. I don't need a forward gate to hit you if you're coming to me. Yeah, basically do Shimmersea Fae things to you from up close without coming to you. For that reason, I think oracles are actually better than people think. If you have a spare 3rd hit, oracles are good for that, but otherwise, discard them.
I mean, the funny thing about oracles is that they're one of those units that shines in deck building, or like with the shadow elves and stuff. And it's just funny that you have a unit that's like, oh, this unit's bad, and it's always bad. You put it in deck building, and suddenly it's like it was in like the finalist deck with Skiriel for shadow elves.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That some of these units that have like these niche uses are actually really useful. That's just an aside that I'm going to toss in there. But yes, there's the fact you can draw a card for 0 magic. There's times when that's useful too, in addition to what you're saying about poking to draw people in. It's like, oh, the juicy little oracle. I'm going to attack it for 2 damage and get my thing. And then like it exposes their position is what you're trying to do there.
Especially if they don't have targets in the midfield and all you have out is closer toward your board, then they have no choice. They have to move forward to attack you. For that reason, I don't really gate too far out. Probably not to give the opponent too many targets out on the field. If I can help it, I can really make use of Shimmersea Fae ranged units to pull the opponent closer. That way, I'm not too dependent on drawing gates, not too dependent on, looking for champs. I can hit you from somewhere more comfortable.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think people understate the ability and the use of oracles. I think they can be a solid unit because it doesn't cost you anything, and you could just continue to build that magic by slowly pinging away at your opponents, while also, if you want, like gaining more info out of your deck with that draw ability. So
yeah, exactly. And it's precisely that point. That's a very important point, Aaron, that I'll probably get to at a later section of the podcast. Saving magic as Shimmersea Fae, banking, 4 magic upwards is scary for the opponent. It's a good problem to have.
let's jump into the champs. What about the champs? There's the 2 sisters who work together, and Borealis. What do you think about those ones?
So off the bat, I think no one's going to disagree. The Deepwater Sisters, the two cost champions, are amazing. 2 cost champions are not a common design. I think they're the only ones that are at 2 cost right now. And they both descend back to the bottom of your deck. So when your opponent kills them, you get back a little bit of value. You don't permanently lose a card. They go back into your deck and they can keep coming back to the field, especially Lyra, which is a good defender for Nymira. So already that's one champ, amazing. That's Lyra, the one that when she attacks, she comes back to a spot near Nymira. You could use her after you clear a spot, and then when you attack with her, you take that spot, so you can spot steal with Lyra. You can also just use it as a hit and run card, and you can use it for defense. So a lot of good things that you can do with Lyra. I think of the two sisters, she is the better one, but do not underestimate the power of the other sister. Inara, the 2-cost ranged ambush sister, is good for really putting focused fire on a single unit. With a scout, that's about 7 dice, 5 to 7 dice if you have that free attack on a single flank. From a single lane of fire, you could throw that much dice. That's almost like an Edia hit. Pretty good still. And honestly, as a very passive player of Shimmersea Fae, I appreciate the range options. Anytime I can bide my time to find good cards, it's good for me, I think. So I value Inara just as much as I do Lyra. So those are the two good champs. Corrales, in the meantime, is a little bit more, how did you put it earlier, James? Maligned. Paralysis is situational and usually not worth it. But because I'm me, I find myself with more magic that I can, make use of sometimes, the way I play the Fae. You can save up for Corrales and make good use of him. One thing that people don't know, or, well, they never really figure this out because they never play him, is that Corrales can push any enemy card. Yes, folks, this includes the enemy's 10 gate. Wow. If that's all you're doing with it, it's not worth it. But there are positions where you can make use of Corrales pretty well. I think my last tournament game against Prophet, against his Vanguards, I think I got to a very good end game where I actually was keeping toe to toe with Prophet's Vanguards on Econ. And Corrales was pretty crucial to holding that endgame. Out of the 3 champions, I think Corrales 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, discard him. That's pretty much that.
And meanwhile, you're playing the sisters 30 times out of 10 because you recur them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean the sisters really shine. I mean, getting them back so many times and bringing them back from the depths each time they come back and using those abilities, they really work well together. I think Corrales, if Corrales could have just had like another health or two, I think it could have been, or maybe one less magic or something. Could have been real nice addition, but it's just not fully there. I think just slightly off.
That's a good suggestion to the buff list, Aaron. I mean, one less magic or a couple points more HP, I definitely would consider him like a standard.
Or maybe like 1 magic and one hit point less. So he's like a 3/6 for 4 magic,
Something like that, right? Like what's that? Like a dagger stat line or like a Taranga, Elvekid, just a better stat line.
Yeah.
But
Well, before we jump into Nim, why don't we touch base on their events? So
mm,
let's start with High Tide. How do you feel about that event, especially since you say that you play more in the back? So it pushes you forward if you want it. So how do you feel about that?
when you consider the card in isolation, you're paying 1 magic for a space of movement for everyone and a boost on Nymira. Take note, of course, it also pushes your gates forward, so it's not just a space of movement. I understate that. In general, if I'm paying 1 magic and a card, well, High Tide itself, I'm paying 1 magic and High Tide itself for just that. I probably could have had a unit with that instead. So when you think about it in those terms, to me, it just doesn't. More times than not, I find that it's not worth it. In the early game, if you think you can sustain opening draws are conducive to an offensive, then by all means, High Tide early. If you draw a gate, even better, fantastic. Get that deep gate in. But otherwise, if you think you can afford to play a slow game, just toss it. It's just an extra magic. Shame, but that's their epic event.
So for getting rid of High Tide, tossing it for Magic, How do you feel about Rebuke, which people often for Magic?
Rebuke for me is almost always a discard. Again, I don't play Rush Shimmersea Fae. I don't find myself in these situations where, oh, I can open up a lane of attack and hit you from, I don't know, 2 places and probably kill you that way. Rebuke is just too costly on the face of it. Like, you pay for the cost of the unit and you don't even destroy the unit. It just goes down to the bottom. One theme you guys will notice with Shimmersea Fae's design is a lot of it is tempo. They don't destroy with Rebuke, and Oracles let you accelerate into the deck, or they let you get magic when your opponent doesn't expect it. So it's a lot of tempo baked into their design. It's a lot of things that buy you the initiative, basically. Rebuke is one of those that if you can find the opportunity for it, it could be the all-star of the game, but if you're asking me, what are you doing? I'm not going to pay for that. If you find a spot where you can pay for that and it's the nail in the coffin, good for you.
It reminds me a bit of like mind control for the breakers. You forget about it and then it makes you lose. Like when you're playing up against them, but like when you have it in your hand, you're like, I don't want to use this right now, you know?
Well, at least mind control is free.
Yeah.
It's one of those. So I say Rebuke. Some people fight for it. Most don't. It's one of those. Toss it unless you really have a good use for it soon. That's Rebuke, and I think everyone can agree. Their other 2 events, Wade In and Spearhead, I think are on the better side of things. Let's start with the more lukewarm event here. Wade In gives units and an Aura 3 adapt, which means that they can only be attacked once. It's actually, I think, better than people give it credit for. Most people would toss it, I would say maybe 50% of the time, maybe even more. But for me, it's useful for holding a position, especially if you're in between draws, you're trying to look for gates, you're not drawing any, but you still want to trade in the middle. If you have a champion that has 4 HP, 4 HP is hard to take down in one hit, so that's worth a Wade In. It's also worth it if there's only one angle of it on your units. Maybe because of Wade In, they only get one attack on you, 1 or 2 attacks on you, and that's it. It buys you a turn. It's basically good insurance. But more than that, the reason why I like Wade In is for a more subliminal reason. I like Wade In when I want to save magic. Aaron pointed out at this earlier. I want to reiterate. As Shimmersea Fae, if you're floating 4 magic and above, you're a loaded gun. So Wade In is one of those cards that you don't have to invest anything, but you have some staying power. You could take a turn, you want to trade with Nymira and some units, it buys you a safe turn. Otherwise, you can just opt for a safer turn, don't Wade In, and just discard it. It's hard to use, and I see why people discard it because Shimmersea Fae commons are easy to clear with 1 attack, right? They at most have 3 HP, Tidebreakers, Swarms. Their ranged units are very frail. So, in general, if you don't really want to hold that midfield, just discard it. Which takes us to the last amazing, amazing event from the Shimmersea Fae. I say amazing, maybe not that much, but Spearhead lets Nymira attack diagonally at +1 strength, with the bonus of if you have a champion on your opponent's side of the field, you get to keep it turn after turn. This one is one of those that you want to think about how you sustain one. Generally, as part of the Shimmersea Fae, this is one of their mini games. It's one of your mini goals. You want to try to sustain a spearhead for as long as you can, 1 or 2 of them. I try to make use of the first one as soon as I can. So just a tactical spearhead. I don't need to sustain the first one. When I'm down to my last one, I try to make the most out of it. So I try to keep a champion safe on my opponent's side of the field. Typically, when you want to push for spearhead, you really want to think about how you can be safe taking your opponent's side of the field, which takes us to, I guess, general gameplay with them. Those are the Shimmersea Fae events. 2 good, too situational.
So I want to touch base on a couple different aspects. First, I want to go back to Rebuke. So Rebuke is something that can be really strong to finish an enemy. And by enemy, I mean the summoner for the most part.
Yep.
It's very hard for an opponent to play around Rebuke, especially if you're getting to that end game and you're like up in their face or you're close quarters with them. It's very hard for them to deal with that and deal with all the other threats you have. But the other thing I wanted to point out about Rebuke is something that James actually originally pointed out. There are certain factions that Rebuke can be really good against. For example, if you Rebuke against like cave goblins and they're mostly zero costers, you're not losing a whole lot there. Besides, you won't get the magic. But other zero costers are even more potentially detrimental. James pointed out pretty early on with Shimmersea Fae that if you Rebuke the starting carrier for the fungal dwarves, it can be brutal if they don't find another carrier because they don't even have their first one. Normally on Fungal Dwarves, you can have rough draws and at least you can bank on having that first carrier. If they don't find any more soon, they don't have any carriers and their engine is kaput.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good nuance to put in there, Aaron. Agree. There are some matchups where Rebuke is better than I put it. I have a particular disdain for Rebuke just because it can be costly, but against certain factions, it really just opens up lines of attack against your opponent. Thing about it though that makes it a little bit hard to use is that you need two clear spaces to target the thing that you want to bounce to the bottom of the deck. But besides that, you can do it before you move or after you move. So there's a lot of flexibility still, but that little goofy clause can make it a little bit hard to use.
Have you tried against like the conclave? I'm curious. There's situations where like you move,
Oh man.
depart some stuff, and then also rebuke something to the
Yeah.
bottom to just clear a lot of spaces.
It's a little tricky against the Spectral Conclave. The Shimmersea Fae aren't really melee heavy. That melee heavy. They've got ways around Depart. They've got Rush. They've got two ranged units. Nymira's summoner ability can trigger first before Depart and
Yeah,
kill the ghost, yeah. But the thing is, how do you get boost on Nymira? They got ways.
spearhead would be good against them too. Allow you to attack safely.
Against the Spectral Conclave, maybe it's redundant because you can depart the thing anyway. Still a very good tool. I'm sure Farron would be sad with one less ghost.
I wanted to touch on Wade In because I think the way you play actually makes Wade In better than a lot of people normally use it. Because a lot of people play, like you said, Shimmersea Fae very aggressive. And Wade In's not as good because your units are normally like pretty injured or they're all up in front. They have plenty of opportunities to like position their units to take down your units even if they can only do one attack. But if you're playing a more defensive game, they might not have those lanes or opportunities to get around a Wade In, and you might just force them into like, well, I just guess I'm gonna pot shot once or something of that nature of like I don't have good opportunities to advance here, and Wade In makes it impossible for me to surround and kill a unit. So I think defensively, Wade In is maybe even better. And then Nymira should be pretty close to everything also, so it makes it.
Oh yeah, that's very true. Generally, Waden is a little bit understated because the way the community perceives a faction is very offensive. They just have to flip their switch and they'll find that this one is one of those Swiss Army knife type events that can be good in more situations than they think.
Yeah, I had a weird game I played once. The player was relatively new to the Swamp Orcs, but I just played against them and I stayed on my half of the field the whole time, like recurring Lyra and the other one, Inara, and just poking with them. And just like Lyra would run up, hit something, and then just go back behind one of my gates because I had Nymira so far back. And I think I probably use Wade In at times just to prevent them from dying quickly. I kind of like had a glimpse of the Econ Shimmersea Fae that you've been talking about, where you just try to recur the two as many times as you can and use them on your half of the field. And it worked pretty well. But again, it was a newer Swamp Orc player, so I don't know if I found something out or not. Like, but it's like I didn't want to I didn't want to rush Muglug, so I just wasted time, or bided
Yeah.
time rather.
Does anybody want to rush Muglug?
It's actually an interesting matchup. I was thinking about it before we were doing the podcast. Where what's a bad matchup for the Shimmersea Fae? I was thinking, oh, is Swamp Orcs one because they like to play on their side of the field. I thought about it. I thought about it again, and I think the Swamp Orcs matchup is actually a little bit more tenable than you guys might think it is.
Yeah, swamp orcs can be tough. They can hit really hard, but if you can stay away from mug, it's doable, I think.
That, and also the swamp orcs tend to crowd their stuff a lot, and you can get a lot of ground as Shimmersea Fae. If you just choke them out by basically clogging every spot, then it's just a losing game from there as Mug.
Why don't we hop into using Nymira? That's a central part of this deck because she has some really good abilities and can deal some good damage and gain some health back. How do you effectively use her?
This one's a very interesting question. Nymira is really key to winning trades as Shimmersea Fae. That summoner ability is strong, make no mistake. Ebb and Flow, granting you potentially 5 damage against a unit, that gives you a lot of killing reach. Like you can kill Fungal Dwarves Beasts, kill High Elves, Justices, basically 5 HP units. You could kill a lot of champs just with Nymira alone. So it can save you. It's basically a free attack when you think about it. But at the same time, its flip side, healing Nymira, is a little bit more subtle and one that I abuse more than most. Typically, when I'm hitting a 3 HP unit, sometimes people would spend that boost just to make sure that they kill the unit, but I like to gamble a little if I can afford it and heal instead of doing damage. But yeah, otherwise both sides of the coin is very strong. 5 potential damage on a single target or healing yourself is very, very strong. When you're using Nymira, you want her up and out on the midfield. That's how you get boosts. She is an active summoner, much like, in the same vein as the momentum summoners. No duh. It says so on the card, momentum. You need to attack to generate value with Nymira. Keeping her in the midfield or around the midfield is the true test of skill. Generally, what I try to do is take the center of the board very strategically. And you hear this like chess. In chess, he who controls the center controls the game, controls the board. It's kind of the same with the Shimmersea Fae, but it's harder to do with them. 12 HP on Nymira means that you be very careful. She really thrives in one-on-one situations. So if it's Nymira versus a single lane of attack, you're gonna eat units alive and pretty much keep yourself safe for the whole game. But if you're out there putting Nymira in the center just by her lonesome, you should be prepared to body block with tidebreakers. I don't know, any unit in front of you, block with Lyra, keep yourself safe with wait in, otherwise it's suicide. So I say take the center of the board slowly. One thing that makes it hard anyway is that your gate and your starting setup is off to the side. So consider that when you're playing Shimmersea Fae. Already you're biased to the right side of the board. Generally, you want Nymira to stay in the middle of the field, attracting fire when you can, and then trading up high HP units and healing up when you can.
Going back to the card you said you normally discard, do you ever play High Tide just for the boost, essentially?
Yes, I do. So with High Tide, if that extra space of movement buys you a position where you can make use of that boost immediately, I think it's worth playing High Tide for that. High Tide is a very opportunistic card. It's not really a card I would play just to move forward. I can afford to keep it in my hand or just discard it. It's not something you need to play ahead of time. But yeah, generally if all you're getting is boost from it, it's pretty meh. Boost and movement from it, it's all right. But if it gets you into good positions, I say it's absolutely worth it.
The next one's a big one. I guess where do you think they are ranking wise overall?
Oh boy.
Do you think they're the worst faction, or do you think there's worse factions? I guess is the question here.
I don't even think they're on the list, man. It's like there's 30 some factions and Shimmersea Fae ain't one of them. I definitely think they're on the lower tiers, but contrary to the community sentiment, I think their under-tuning was a necessary evil. I joined the playtest server around the time that the Shimmersea Fae was in development. I got to see them strong, basically. So they're kind of strong. It can really feel bad on the receiving end. They can summon a lot of units and get a lot of magic in spots where you don't think they have magic because of Oracle's tempo. Not to mention, Oracle is a unit itself. So the fact that they can get up your face in so many ways with High Tide, Rush, a free unit with Oracle, you could imagine them just being in front of your gates and everywhere on the side of the field ASAP. I think it was slightly necessary that they turned out weaker than they are. But unfortunately, they are weak and they're pretty dang weak. I might be understating that, but yeah, they are on the bottom tier. No doubt about that. Don't let me change your mind about that.
Given that, what do you think are their best matchups?
Best matchups. Aaron and I were talking about this a little bit beforehand. He already clued in on it with one of the events that we talked about. Fungal Dwarves is a decent matchup, I think, for Shimmersea Fae. Debatable by how much. I would say it's closer than people think. I don't think it's a lopsided matchup. I don't think it's a 60-40, but there are some advantages being Shimmersea Fae. For example, Fungal Dwarves depends a lot on drawing the correct units at a particular order. You want your beasts. You want your carriers in your discard. Without carriers, you can't fuel your engine, etc., etc. And so rebuke, even a rebuke on a beast maybe would be bad for them. But rebuke on carriers is amazing. That's for sure. It's also hard for fungal dwarves to do damage to you. If you find a safe spearhead spot, you could really pressure a very entrenched Koldak Diamond with the Shimmersea Fae. Not to mention Nymira against beasts. It's a pretty good use of her ability. If your beast ever goes down to 4 HP, she can clear that by her lonesome. But in general, even though it's a good matchup, I say still be careful about demand. As Nymira, one bad mage demand on you and you're probably out of the running. So that's one.
I have one that I've come across a few times. I think they're actually pretty decent against the Wayfarers.
I was gonna put them in here, Jaxic, and specifically, I think because you and I talked about it a little bit. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's probably about even or maybe slightly Shimmersea Fae favor because the thing that Shimmersea Fae like to do, which is get on your side of the board. I know you were saying you don't do that as much, but just the fact that they're good at stealing spots and controlling the midfield means that Celeste usually isn't going to be rolling a lot of dice. It can be tough. Also, Wade in is exceptional because often the Wayfarers have like 1 or 2 turns where they're just trying to get you. And if you have Wade in up, it just kind of turns that off.
Yeah, those are pretty good points. And I think on the defensive too, like even if Wayfarers gets up in your face, just because I'm naturally a defensive player, I like the fact that they're coming to me. I think Shimmersea Face stands a chance even on the defensive against the Wayfarers.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. And the fact that you can heal is good. They don't finish you off, and that's like, oh, well, now Nymira is just going to start turtling up and healing and survive for a while. So they're kind of just naturally good at playing the defensive game in that way, too, potentially, even if people don't really think of them as doing that.
And one interesting other matchup that I think SF has a good time with is Storm Goblins, actually. This one it takes a slight leap of intuition to think about it, but Nymira can heal back Circuit pretty well, and they have a lot of from hand power. So that means they don't really need to field that many units, which means less circuit chains for, or harder circuit chains for Thrak. They need to come forward, and if they do come forward, there's a lot of ways you can punish them. Once you get up in Thrak space, you could really hit Thrak hard and have them running. So from there, it's pretty much could be pretty easy to just finish them off. I think I beat Prophet and several other Storm Goblins players with Shimmersea Fae. And Panopticon also whipped my ass with Shimmersea Fae too against my Storm Goblins. Pretty good matchup, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's a good one for sure. I think there's a couple more that they're like fairly even with. Like I think they can do pretty decent against like the one factions that don't have like a lot of tricks, like Vanguards or like Tundra Orcs. Because I think the more honest factions, they can Nymira can get more in the game and she can punish pretty hard.
The one tricky thing I would say about Tundra Orcs though is that even with weight in, you can still like one shot your 2-cost champions with like smashers if they have even with either re-rolling or even for glory.
Oh yeah.
So that kind of hurts when you're like, oh, I'll put weight in on my champ. I was like, well, still gone, because Grognak will hit it or something,
Yeah, that's true. And Vanguards, yeah, in general, I think Shimmersea Fae can stand a chance. But if you let Vanguards, if a good Vanguards player keeps you at arm's length, they could just out econ you. Depending on how you play the Shimmersea Fae, I think it's a pretty fair matchup.
They probably do pretty decent against Cave Goblins. I have not played that, I think, personally, but I feel like that's a faction that could definitely contend with Cave Goblins because they have a lot of extra ways to get attacks and take out Goblin units, and you can take stuff out with ebb and flow. And it's probably fairly even because Cave Goblins can always try and kill Nym.
Yeah.
I think the Swamp Orcs one is interesting, like I said, because you have the potential to just ambush with office stuff is good for clearing like drudgers and then still hitting something you want to hit.
That's true.
Take that little 2-die shot, hit 1 damage, and then the drudger's gone, and then hit again or whatever. Because they're kind of good at focus firing, and they focus fire with their commons or like a champion that's far enough back, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
What do you think are like some common mistakes that people make when they're learning to play Shimmersea Fae?
I think there's not a lot of easy common mistakes to spot. One thing I know for sure that I see people do a lot is playing swarms immediately to return something you just played. Generally, spending 2 plus whatever you just summoned this turn is very wasteful. Unless you're really getting a lot out of that, I don't recommend that you return something that you just played immediately. Try to make use of that, of whatever you summoned for another turn before returning it to your hand. Unless it's an oracle, which means it's free. Yeah, return it to your hand and then toss it. Whenever you spend on a unit before you return it to your hand, try to make use of it one more turn. The other mistake, quote unquote mistake, I think, is a more philosophical one. Don't just rush in because you think that the Shimmersea Fae has only 1 game. You can burn up and burn out fast. You can draw a lot of cards that you need to make the plays that you want to do, but if your gamble doesn't pay off, if you can't plan what your opponent does on the defensive, then they can easily just out barricade you and just stall you, and you lose on the principle that you don't have any more cards in your deck. You're burned out too fast. So consider, plan your turn, imagine what your opponent's turn could be, and then imagine what your response could be to their turn. That goes for any other faction as well, but more so for the Shimmersea Fae. Your units are really frail. Nymira is frail, the commons are frail. Any expenditure must be worth it. So consider what you spend on, consider where you position them, consider not spending at all. Plan out your turns, be very strategic.
Then the opposite of the question we asked earlier is which factions do you think are the toughest for them to face?
Oh boy. What factions are in the game? That's pretty much the answer. So obviously there's the usual top tier factions. There's Shadow Elves. You could play around it if you play them like I do. If you play Shimmersea Fae like I do, you could exploit one of the weaknesses of Shadow Elves, which is they're not very good if they can't pull back when they're overextended. You could punish well. In general, that's going to be a tall order. Then there's also the Filth, another strong top faction du jour. So Filth is just good. It's hard, but Nym has decent clearing power against cultists. I think people would discard anointed cultists against Nymira. It's even though you have punching power against the filth, it's very easy for them to go for the throat. Some of the other top tier factions are probably doable. Factions like Savannah Elves, I would probably lean more towards rushing the Savannah Elves and then probably doing the same for Sand Goblins. It's a little bit tricky, but it's doable. There's some good hits against a 10 HP summoner, you know. It makes you want to think like, how am I going to kill this dude from across the field? So Shimmersea Fae generally has a hard time against those top factions. Then there's a number of other clear like bad matchups. For example, old Fallen Kingdom I think is just impossible. If it's not 90-10, it's probably something close. 70 something. I think you just pretty much drown in carrier slowly or die to a short blood summon turn. Those are just the two predetermined outcomes. Unless you can rush Retalis with rebukes and good high tides, or they just kill you with blood summon anyway. So I really think there's no way around it. I probably overstate that, might be hyperbole, but I think that one is a clear, hard matchup. Some other matchups that might be hard, we talked about it a little bit. Theoretically, I think Spectral Conclave might be a bad matchup, but only because of Depart. There's a lot of, theorizing around Depart and how to play around it. It's a really hard ability to contend against, and a lot of melee centric or, melee dependent factions have a hard time against Depart. So it goes without saying, even though Shimmersea Fae has ways around it, I think it might be a hard one to beat. You do have Wade In against Unleash, but I don't know about that. In general, they have a hard time proving their advantage against everyone. There's a number of other ones that we could talk about, but then we're just talking about, Shimmersea Fae bad, which everyone already knows.
You kind of delved into a little bit with the Fallen Kingdom, but like, how do you counter the combo factions as the Shimmersea Fae?
Yes, that was a good question planted by Aaron. I don't know if you guys intended for that, foreseeing this bad matchup. It's a really interesting question, especially for FK. For that particular faction, you could probably rush Ret down, but you need to prove your advantage. You're probably going to need to sacrifice pieces to purchase positions, basically. Open up lines of attack with Rebuke and really force the issue on your opponent before they could benefit from a sacrificial pyre. But that depends if Ret gets himself low from, reanimating. A good player probably would just keep you at arm's length with carriers and the other stuff that Fallen Kingdom does. But in general, even if you're not playing Shimmersea Fae, to counter a combo faction, you need to know the threat range of the combo faction. So, when you're playing against Mountain Vargath, you should be thinking about ramming advance and their glory callers. Or if you're playing against Polar Dwarves, it's going to be hard, but you have to think about Glacial Shift and Ice Ram. If you're playing against Eternal Council, you have to think about, can they hit me from here with an advisor? If you're playing against the Cloaks, well, just pray, I guess, and hope you don't get a bad hit. But out of shadows and moto boots, you have to think about all these things, especially with the Shimmersea Fae. There are some ways around those cards that I talked about, but in general, even when you're not playing the Fae, know the combo faction's threat range. The other solid tip that I would give to counter a combo faction is to float magic. One of the things that a lot of you folks in the podcast and video space talk about, how certain players kind of just fritz out because they can't compute. Like Donkey needs to compute every outcome because you have 6 magic or so. They have to compute all the possibilities, what cards they have. Floating magic as a bluff can be a deterrent to buy you time, I guess. It doesn't do anything as an active move, but as a bluff, it can work. It can work. I think that's my one true tip to counter combo factions is Shimmersea Fae. But yeah, the rest are just principles. plan your escape route, know your opponent's threat range, and also count your cards. If you know how to, then you know how to. Ask Massimo about how to count your opponent's cards.
Yeah, I mean, using the game log analyzer is always a good thing. I find that
Is that publicly advertised, the game log analyzer?
I
Okay.
think so.
I was cautious about that a little. Use the game log analyzer in swzone.com so that you know what cards are left in your opponent's decks.
Yeah, it's just super helpful to figure out what you have to expect, and sometimes it's more helpful than others. Like I was remembering one of the times I was in a tournament and I was playing against Cave Goblins. Opponent I played against, which sometimes this happens with Cave Goblins, didn't discard a single card, so I could accurately tell exactly what they had left in their hand at the end of the game. Like I knew their exact hand because they never discarded a card the entire game. I know what you have, and so I can play around that, which is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
I've never used that, but I guess it shows.
I definitely think I win more games when I use the game log analyzer than when I don't.
That's true. Yep.
Just gotta play the 45-minute games.
True.
I try not to be too sweaty anymore in my games. One of the things that we touched on is I'm kind of just lurking now on the sidelines, watching tournament games and enjoying my time from there. Play the game as hard as you want to. You can be sweaty and really count cards and really sweat over what your opponent's next move could be, or enjoy it as well. Just play a 45-minute game, not think too hard about it.
I guess if you're gonna win with Shimmersea Fae, you gotta use every tool you have.
Yeah. Yep. Honestly, true.
Well, I know we've talked a little bit about it interspersed, but why don't you just touch on a little bit like what cards you tend to discard for Magic?
So I've got my list here on this side. When I'm playing the Fae, I discard maybe one swarm, two if necessary, but I think that just hurts your ability to make a potent counter attack, make a potent attack in general. So 1 to 2 swarms if necessary. I would say discard 1 to 2 tidebreakers. You've got your spare one in your opening. I try to discard one scout if necessary. Sometimes you get in those spots where you're stuck with one magic and you want to get up to 2 because that's your threat range, but you don't have a choice. You need to discard something. I have to discard a scout in that situation. I know I gave a hot take, but in general, discard all your oracles if you can. If you're not playing the way that I play, definitely discard your oracles. They're not really worth the magic that you give to your opponent and what you get for playing them, like 2 range. You're probably going to get 1 damage on your opponent and they get 1 magic for that. That's not a good trade in general. Discard your oracles in general unless you have a plan with them, like I do when I poke. And then again, even though there are some matchups that are good for Rebuke, I would say discard all your Rebukes, if not save one if you really want to make a play with it. The same thing goes for High Tide. I say discard one for sure. And then if you want to make a play with it, you can keep one in your back pocket. And then for the remaining 2 events, I would say Spearhead is best used twice. But if you really need that 1 magic in a pinch, yeah, sure, discard the first Spearhead. But definitely keep the last one. Don't discard the last one. And for weight in, it's up to you how you really play. If you play defensively, if you can make good use of it in certain pinch spots, then it can be good. Otherwise, discard one, definitely. If not, discard both. I think that's fine too. And then, unfortunately, I would say, again, 8 times, 9 times out of 10, discard Corrales. And then never ever discard the 2 other champs unless you're crazy.
That makes sense. You listed a lot of cards you potentially discard. Do you think that's part of the reason that the faction as a whole seems weaker? Is just because they have a lot of cards where you're like, I guess I could discard this, you know?
Yes, but also, I guess in general, but again, I go back to my earlier point. I don't think their commons are that bad. They're frail, but not so bad that I'm working with a deck that has fewer good cards than others.
Scouts are a great unit, I think, obviously. Tidebreakers, especially if you have a champion out, are pretty good value. And they can steal spots and do all kinds of other good stuff with the scouts.
The swarm is also good, but the thing is, again, if you're playing a swarm, ideally you're getting a unit back to your hand so that you can get some magic back, quote unquote, from playing the swarm. But for a 2-cost unit, 3 HP, it's still strong, don't get me wrong. But yeah, a lot of their units are just on the weak side, easy to clear. In general, Shimmersea Fae is just on the frail side. That's why I think they tend to perform weaker than most. Because they don't put up a fight and they're all up in your face and they can really just crash and burn like that.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Any last final tips for our listeners? Any wisdom to close us out?
Consider really playing the Shimmersea Fae slowly. People state that, you need your champs and you need your gates, and you do, but you have tools to draw cards. You have your oracles, you have your scouts. You can do a little bit of card counting. If you guys know I'm gambling, some card game parlance, you can card count to check your probabilities of drawing a gate. You can be very calculating like that. But you can also just play them slow. Poke from range with scouts, with oracles, and wait for a good time until you draw the pieces that you need to establish an offensive. I think Vexer has said it in a previous podcast, but if you really must, you don't have to move forward with Nymira. You can take inactivity damage if you really need to, just so that you can prep for a very good turn. But do this in a very considered way. I would say that's my one big tip.
Well, Beast, we appreciate you coming on to talk Shimmersea Fae.
Happy to be here, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
This has been another episode of Discard for Magic, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.